Alright, so we're back for another painting tutorial, and it's sort of a part 2, but it's also a standalone. In the last video we painted Yndrasta here, the Celestial Spear, and I chose to just do her in that video, and then I'm going to do the base in this video, in case there are people who just want to see the base, because swamp bases can be obviously applied to any number of miniatures, not just the new Stormcast models. So yeah, if you want to see the painting of her, go check out the previous video. But otherwise, we will carry on and do the base. So we're going to start off with the texture paint that's going to be on the base of this miniature. And this is going to be Armageddon Dust. There's two Armageddon technical paints. There's Armageddon Dust and Armageddon Dunes. Dunes is thicker, has much bigger texture in it, and so can pile up higher. Dust is thinner. I prefer Dust for when I'm doing things like a swamp, like this, for instance. I don't need the giant mounds of texture, I just need a texture, and, you know, some variance in height is okay, but I don't require it to be crazy. So I'm just going to put this down all over the base here, making sure that, like I just said, some parts are higher, some parts are lower, but I don't need it to be ridiculously high up in any one spot. I'm putting this up onto the bits of base that exist because we want it to blend right in. We don't want a obvious line where plastic part begins and texture paint ends. So I'm gonna put that all the way up to everything here. Try not to cover up too much detail, but if we do cover up some, it's not the end of the world. Just make sure to get it off the side there. And especially in here where there's all these trees and stuff, I want to make sure to get right up to the edge of all this stuff. Blend it out nicely. Get all the way under there. In here. You just have to make sure after you put this stuff on, that you go along and get it off the rim of your base, because when you go to paint the rim of your base, it won't look so good if there's chunky texture paint there. So I'm just using the small end of this hobby spatula now, just to make sure we get into all the nooks and crannies here. Like I said, you don't want any lines where plastic ends and texture paint begins. You want it to flow smoothly between the modeled texture and texture of the paint. Well, the part isn't glued down, so we'll lock that in with our texture paint. Probably should glue that down first, but you know, no time to do it now, so I'm just gonna go up onto that texture. It's already there. And I think I'm going to put a couple mounds of it here, because we are going to put some resin for some water out here. So I just do want a couple high points. So I'm just going to mound it up here. Maybe like that. That should be good. And then maybe do one more right here. Alright, so then we just let that dry. It will take a considerable amount of time to dry. But it's worth it. You don't want to hit this with a hairdryer. If you do that, the top layer will dry and the bottom layers won't, and you'll get this crust on top that won't allow the bottom layers to dry. So not only will you not help your situation in any way, you'll actually hurt the situation and you'll have to redo your texture paint. So yeah, we'll let that dry, and once that's all dried up, we'll come back and do the next step. Alright, so we're back and our texture paint is all nice and dry. So now we're going to color that texture paint, and we're going to do that with Cygor Brown. It's a brand new pot of Cygor Brown, so I'll give it a good shake. Make sure all that medium and binder and pigment is all mixed up together. And then I'm just going to go in and start coloring this. I want to try to avoid the stone and stuff as much as possible. I want to try to keep that pretty pristine. We're going to try to use a lighter color to paint it, We're not going to use a contrast paint, so it's not crucial. It just will be that using a lighter color will mean that if we have a bunch of dark brown splotches all over it, it'll just be harder to cover. So we may as well try to save ourselves a little bit of time later, having to do 3 or 4 coats, by just being a little bit careful applying this. So I'm just going to go around like this, and anywhere where the texture paint has gone up on the rock like that, I'm just going to leave that color, and I'll just paint it the rock color. If the rock has a little bit of extra texture on it, that's not a problem. I'm going to go over here, and same thing with the tree, except in this case we are going to use contrast paint to paint this tree, so we want to be extra careful. There's some dirt that goes up here, and just keep in mind that as you're watching me do this, so like over here I said I didn't want to get any paint on the stone, but like here, this was ground texture that was already on the miniature, and so we do want to make sure to get that. So we're not just avoiding all primer, we're making sure to avoid just the stone parts. So yeah, I'll just go around the miniature, making sure I get all this dirt colored this way, and then we'll come back and do the next step. Alright, so that's all done. Almost dry, but getting there still. Now we're going to move on to painting the tree. And for that, we're going to use snakebite leather. And this is just going to be the tree itself, not all the like weeds and stuff hanging off of it. But we just want to make sure that we get a nice even coat of this on the whole thing, so that it spreads out nicely and actually looks like a tree. Doesn't just look like a blobby mess. So this is pretty straightforward, just making sure to not leave any primer showing. Make sure to finish each section of the tree before moving on to the next, so you don't get lines in your contrast paint. If you let an edge like this dry, actually I'll leave it there since it's in the back, no one will see it. If you leave lines like that to dry, you can get a line in your contrast paint. And even though you might think it's the same color, so why would it show a line? You'll see what I mean. It's slightly different than how layer paint works. So we'll just get the rest of the tree here. We can go over these weeds a little bit because we're going to paint those with layer paint, not a problem. We've got this little demon squirrel here to paint later also. We'll do that at the end probably. Get that in, making sure to not flick any paint onto these wings up here. I already did that a little bit with the Null Noil step on her earlier, and I had to fix it, but as long as it's not too bad, it shouldn't be a problem. Alright, so then, well, let me finish this little part right here, and then we'll go back and I'll show you what I mean by the line forming in the contrast paint. We'll just go about there. Alright, so now we have this contrast paint here, and it's all dry. Then we're going to go in and continue painting with it. And if you go and look right here, you can still see that line. This is the line where our paint was dry already, and there's our new contrast line. On a tree, it's not as bad because it's got vertical lines for bark and stuff, but on other things it's really noticeable, and that happens because you can't paint exactly right up to the edge and match your brush strokes exactly, and so you get a second layer of contrast on the part that's already dried, and just the one layer of contrast on the new stuff. And so you get a difference in color. And that's how you get these weird looking lines in your contrast paint, which usually don't look good, so you want to try to avoid them. But yeah, I'm just going to finish up the last couple nooks and crannies here of this tree, And then we will come back. Actually, before I say that, I'm going to base coat this little demon squirrel in this same color, just so that if I miss any parts of him, he'll just have a nice brown background. That won't be a problem. But yeah, so I'm just going to finish up the last couple parts of this tree here, and we'll come back and do the next step. Alright, so our tree's all finishing drying, almost drying, but we're going to move on to Rakarth Flesh, and this is going to be the stone color for this miniature. We're going to dirty it up and probably put some moss on it and stuff for the fact that it's been living in a swamp, but we're going to start off with this nice color. My idea for this is that this was once maybe some architecture built by the people of Excelsis, and then the swamp kind of reclaimed it. Maybe it was a watchtower, or maybe someone's house, or I don't know what, but in my mind, you know, Excelsis or Excelsius kind of has the same sort of feel as Minas Tirith from Lord of the Rings. Sort of an outpost of humanity in the scary part of the world. In this case, there's beasts roaming around, and now new swamp goblins trying to murder everybody. So that's what I think this bit of architecture was. So because of that, we're going to paint it a nice kind of cream color here. And then, of course, the swamp has already done its reclaiming, so we'll put some moss on it, put some brown washes on it, put a little bit of green here and there, do all sorts of stuff to it. But first step is just to get this nice base coat done. So I will go ahead and crack on with this, get it all finished up, put 2 layers or 2 coats wherever we need 2 coats, and then we'll come back and do the next step, which I think will be some tree highlights. But we'll see. Every time I promise the next step is going to be something, it's almost always something else. So I'll see you on the next step, whatever it may be. Alright, so we're back, and all that is dry and ready to go. So now we're going to move on to highlighting the tree, and that's going to be with some Gorthor Brown. And we're going to make sure our brush is kind of wet still. And we're just going to get some paint on here. Probably end up on the brush mixing about 50-50 with water and paint. And then we're just going to come along and brush along the big raised surfaces here. We still want to keep this yellow color, sort of yellowy brown color that the snakebite leather gave us, but we want to give it a little more brown also. The snakebite leather, when just left on its own, can look a little too yellowy, orangey for wood. So we'll just carry this Gorthor Brown around the miniature here, and that will help sell this tree more like wood. So I'll just finish that real quick, and then we're going to move on to a technique. I'm going to keep the camera going here because this will be done in just a second, but we're going to move on to a technique that I haven't tried very much, but I think it'll work well here. So, you know, we're going to give it a whirl, and if it doesn't work, well, we can always just repaint and be fine. So there we go. There's our tree given a little bit more wooden color. So now what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this stone here, and I'm not going to use paint, just going to use my brush. And I'll be the first to admit, I do not change my paint water as much as I should. However, today I made sure specifically not to change it. We're just going to use dirty water to go over this stone. And that's because this stone has been in a swamp, and so water has been getting on it, most likely, for many years. So if we get little tide marks or anything like that from the water, that will be just fine, because it's a swamp. It's wet. And the reason we're doing it this way is because I could use wash. I absolutely could use wash and just water it down and make sure it did its thing still. But water, or rather wash, is intended to be put on miniatures like this. And so it has flow aid and stuff in it to help it go into the cracks and stay off the surfaces. But that isn't necessarily what we want. We just want this stuff to kind of go everywhere, and if it stains the surfaces, that's fine. If it gets in the cracks, that's fine. Does not matter. So that's what we're doing here. And also, like I said, the wash is meant for this purpose. So it's purposely going to, or it was created so that it doesn't dry in weird blotchy patterns and stuff like that. But weird blotchy patterns on this stone that's probably been waterlogged for most of its existence is just fine. So we're just going to do this. Like I said, I haven't done this very often, so it might do nothing. But if it ends up looking cool, then I'll be happy. And if not, I'll just go over with it, go over the stone with some wash, and well, there you go. So we'll put that on. Just this dirty water. I'm going to put a little bit more in here. And then I'm just going to let this dry for a little while. And then we'll come back, see what it looks like, and move on to the next step. Alright, well that's all dry, and as you can see, it basically did nothing. I'd used it once before on some rocks that I was doing in a rainforest, on a rainforest base, and it worked really well there. Maybe I just got lucky and there was, my paint water was older, or who knows. Who's to know, but that's okay, we'll deal with it some other way. But for now, we're going to move on, and we're going to do all the reeds and stuff hanging from the tree. So we're going to do Scarsnet Green to start off. So we're just going to carefully paint in all these hanging bits. We just want to make sure to avoid the wood where possible. And I'm also going to do the grasses that are on the ground in this color. So this stuff and that stuff over there. I'm probably going to end up putting different colors of wash on it. So that's how we'll differentiate it. But for a nice bright green undertone, I will use the same for all of it. So yeah, I'll plow through this real quick. It won't take more than a couple minutes. And then we will come back, and I'm not sure what we'll do next, but the next step will be next. That is for certain. Alright, so we finished up the green on all the grasses and reeds and stuff. Now we're going to do two colors in the same step. We're going to use Militarum Green and Creed Camo. For all the reeds that are hanging off the trees, we're going to use Creed Camo. And for all the grasses on the floor, we're going to use Militarum Green. So I'll start with the Creed Camo, and I'm just going to kind of use this like a wash, basically. Not put it on as heavy as I might if I was using it as an actual contrast color. Just like a wash or a tint or a glaze even. Just to give the reeds a little darker color. Looks good, and make sure to get the back, or the front, I suppose this is. Just make sure to get all the hanging ones. And if you wanted, you obviously, well, you can do whatever you want, obviously, but another suggestion that I would make is that if you wanted to go a little more detailed, you could do these in many different colors and really mix it up. I'm going for just kind of your simple tabletop ready, so one color is good enough for me. So then we're going to use some Militarum Green and do the ones on the floor. That'll be this stuff. And these down here. And the Militarum Green, the reason we're using that on the stuff on the floor of the swamp here, I keep saying floor because I keep wanting to think jungle floor, like the forest floor, but on the ground is what I mean when I say that. it's a little closer to the flocking we're going to use for some moss and stuff, and so that's why I went with this. So now I'm going to go straight into the next step also, and that's going to be just to paint this one little cattail here. So we're going to use some dryad bark, and we're just going to paint the business end, I guess, of the cattail, the seed pod, or whatever it is. Just paint that in like that. And make sure to get the back. There we go. So there's that all painted up. So we'll let that all dry, and then we'll come back and get on to the next step. Alright, so that's in the process of drying, almost done, and like a dummy, I did the next step without hitting the record button, but all I did was add some Ushabti bone to this skull right here, that one in there, and on the bones of the demon squirrel in there. So, nothing major, but just forgot to hit the record button. Now we're going on to Iron Warriors, and we're going to put this on these little candelabras, at least that's what they look like to me, that are here. And this reinforces, or makes me happy about my choice of stone and my little narrative that I had going on for this building, because in my mind, why would you ever have a candelabra this low? Which makes me think this building has kind of sunk into the swamp a little bit. So yeah, I'm happy with that. But yeah, just added that little bit of Iron Warriors right there to those, and that's that. So now I'm going to move on to what? Ah, yes. I'm just going to keep the camera rolling here. I'm going to take some Gorgrunta fur and just go over this little demon squirrel. At least the parts of it that are not bone. My Gorgrunta fur is leaking a little bit, but it's okay. So we're just going to go over this and his skin here. There we go, just to differentiate him from the tree. Alright, so we'll let those next couple steps dry, and then we'll come back and I think get into a wash. Alright, so that's all dry. Now we're going to go on to some Agrax Earthshade, and we're going to put this onto the stone here. We're going to do something slightly different with it. So we're going to put it on as we normally do, like this. But then, as you can see, that's a little too heavy for what we're trying to do. So I'm going to wipe my brush off, and then come back in and just pull it back off some of the surfaces. So it'll just absorb back into our brush, like that. And so we'll have some clean surfaces still, but we'll also get the wash where we need it. So I'll show you again on this step. Wipe my brush off, and just come in and take it back off. So we still have, I shouldn't say clean surfaces, because we don't want clean surfaces, but we still want a lot of that original color shining through. So we're just going to do this all over. I'll do it on some of the bricks here so you can see what I mean on the bricks. So I'll put it on pretty heavy here, wipe my brush off, and then come back and just rub the brush along the individual bricks, pulling the color back off. So I'm just going to keep doing this on the rest of the miniature. Once that's done, we'll let it dry completely, and then I think it will be time to move on to some of the flocking and the resin we're going to add. So I'll see you then. Alright, so we got that wash all dried. As you can see, it kind of dirtied up our stone a little bit, but we still have that color that we started with underneath. Now we're going to use some grass green flock from the Army Painter. This is basically just green sawdust. And in combination with that, we're going to use some snakebite leather. So I'll show you what we're going to do here. First of all, we've made sure that our wash is completely dry, because this stuff will stick to wet paint like no tomorrow, and that's how we're going to use it now. So what we're going to do is look for high points of this texture paint we've laid down. So here, and we're just going to put this snakebite leather down on top of it, on this high spot here. And then we're going to take some of this flock and just sprinkle it on there. And it'll stick to the wet paint, and we just blow it off a little bit. And there you have it. It sticks right to the wet paint, but not to other places. So we're going to do this around the miniature, looking for these high points, like I said. Because the low points, we're going to add some resin to look like puddles or water or something like that. So I'll do another one here, and then I'll show you something else we're going to do with it also. Similar practice here, but just slightly different usage. So we just sprinkle that on, tap the loose stuff off, blow on it once or twice, and there we go, we're all set. So now what we're going to do is rinse this brush off, and I'm going to get my smaller brush. I have been using the medium brush, but we're going to get the small one now. Take the same snakebite leather, and let's go right here. I'm going to paint some of this right into this crack here. And then I'm just going to wind this up following the cracks on the miniature. So maybe up here and right here. And then take a little bit of the same stuff, sprinkle it in there. Make sure it's nice and filled in there. Tap off the extra. Blow on it, and there you can see now we have a little bit of moss or something growing up the cracks in the rock here. So I'm just going to carry on doing this all over the miniature, keep putting some more little moss and stuff in on the cracks, maybe up the tree a little bit, and on the high points of the dirt. And we'll come back and we'll be ready to put on the resin. Alright, so we got all our flocking on there. As you see, we did some up there, did some around on the base, did some up on the tree here, and in the stones back here. So yeah, we're all good there. And I said the next step was going to be the resin, but of course I was wrong. Now we do the tufts. Completely forgot about the tufts, even though it's one of my favorite parts. So we're just going to take some super glue here. This is from Army Painter. And all these tufts are from Gamer's Grass. These are Lavender Flowers. These are bright green Shrubs, and these are Swamp XL tufts. So we're going to use all three of these. And they are self-adhesive, but I always like to put a little bit of glue on the bottom just to make sure they're properly stuck down. And we're going to do them sort of just haphazard here. Here and there. They can be on the flock we've just put down or on the part we've left brown. It does not matter. Stick one of those there. Grab another one of these swamp ones. And I think I'll stick that maybe right here up against the rock. Make sure that's stuck down really well. And then I'll get another little one of those and put it back here. Maybe right here. That'll work. And so all the spots that we've left dark brown here is where we're going to put the resin for our water. So if they're kind of half submerged, that's just fine with me. They'll still look good. So now we're going to take some lavender flowers here. And let's just find a couple spots for them. Stick one in there. I'm just looking for small ones right now. On some bases, I will put a larger one, but for this one, I think we're just going to do a couple smalls. And I'm using the lavender flowers here just because they're a little more muted. They're not crazy in-your-face color. And even with that, though, they are a little dark, or a little bright, rather, for what we want. So we're going to take some snakebite leather to them in a second to knock them down even another stage. Now I'm going to move on to these bright green shrubs here. And the same thing, just apply a little dab of glue. And then I think I'll stick one in here. I try to avoid to block like details, really nice details on the miniature. Like, so for instance, this little knot in the wood right here, we put some flock in there. That's a really nice detail, so I don't want to put a tuft there and block that. So let's see if we can find another small one. Here we go. of these, and I think I'll put this one here. And then we just kind of want to look it over your miniature, and I think I need one more small one, and I'll stick it right here in the middle, right in there. There we go. And I think that is a pretty good base. I thought about maybe putting a tuft up here somewhere on the stairs, but I'm not sure I have a small enough one. I could cut one down and maybe do it. Nope, actually, here's a perfect size one. I have a little tiny one here. I'm just going to prune off these extra branches here. And then we'll stick this one, put it right here under foot. Right in there. Just make sure the leaves are out. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to let all that super glue dry completely, and then we'll come back and tone these bright green and bright purple shrubs down a little bit. Alright, so our super glue is all nice and dry. Now we're going to take some snakebite leather and back to our medium brush. And we're just going to tap some of this into all our tufts here, just to knock the color down on them just a little bit. Still want the purple and the green to show through, but just to make them feel more like a dead swamp sort of color. And if we have any of the... Sometimes when you put super glue down on a surface, it'll create this sort of like chalky white appearance. So if we see any of that anywhere, we'll just paint over that with this contrast paint also. So we'll just breeze through this real quick. I'll keep the camera rolling. This is the sort of thing that we could always come back and add more later. And I'm just putting a little bit in here just to give these guys a little bit of variation. Tap that in there. Get a little more of this in here. And then a little more on here, I think. There we go. That should do. So now our tufts are just a little more dead marsh swamp looking. And we're going to go straight into the next step, actually. And for this, we need our hobby spatula, probably the short end, or the skinny end, rather. And we're going to use some Green Stuff World UV resin. And to cure our UV resin, the ultraviolet flashlight. So actually, you know, I was going to immediately jump into this, but I'm going to let all this completely dry and set up, and then I'll come back and do the resin. Alright, so we've got everything dry, and now we're going to use our Green Stuff World resin, our hobby spatula, and our UV light. So, we're going to start off by just putting some of this UV resin in where we have the dark brown parts of our base here, and just spread it out like that. And we don't need these to be thick water, so I'm just going to take my hobby spatula and spread it out here. We just want it to look like it's wet ground or some puddles or something like that, so not super important that it be thick. So I'm just going to spread it out on here. Put a little more right there. And again, we'll just use our hobby spatula to spread it out. Get some more down here. So as you can see, it's just about placing a dollop and then moving it where you need it to be. You just want to be careful to keep your base flat while you do this, or perpendicular to gravity, I guess you could say. Parallel to your work surface, just so that your resin doesn't run off, because this won't start setting until it is introduced to UV light. That's its purpose after all. So I'm going to come over here, put a little dollop there. Just work in. If it tries to run off like it does here, just pull it back off. Do some here and a little bit here. There we go. So yeah, we'll just finish going around here. Well, and I'll show you. Then we just use the UV flashlight and cure it all up. And then we'll come back, do the base rim, and do the wrap-up. Alright, so we're back and our resin is all nice and dry. I added some to the stuff hanging down here just to look like there's some water there. I also put some right here and running down this, so it looks like there's some water collecting there, and then right here on the edges. And then back here in some of the knots of the wood. So yeah, that's our base done. The only thing left to do is to paint the base rim black. But I'm going to leave this model for a little while to make sure everything's nice and dry completely before I take it off the paint holder and paint the base rim black. But now you should be seeing some pictures of it all finished with the base rim. And with a nice background and everything. But yeah, that'll do it for this episode. Hope you all enjoyed it. There'll be another one coming pretty hot on the heels of this one. I'm not sure exactly what it will be for yet, but rest assured it's coming. And I think there's even going to be another one before the end of this week, so look forward to that. Thank you everybody for watching. Again, if you didn't watch the video where I painted her, go and watch that. But if you're not interested in that and you were just here for the swamp base, I appreciate it either way. So thank you again for watching, and I will see you on the next one.